Hello, teachers. This is our final session of our course CP 105, and I hope you have learned a lot from all the sessions and lessons in this course despite this mode of learning delivery. For the flow of this session, we will start with the presentation of Lesson 3 outputs from selected groups. We already synthesized this lesson last virtual meet. After the lesson three presentations, we will recap lesson four, which talks about test development process, and lesson five, which is all about understanding the classroom assessment in K 12. Each lesson synthesis will be followed by presentations of output from selected groups. And finally, I will briefly review the culminating activity, though I have explained this during the last virtual session. So now let's start with the presentation of lesson 3 outputs.
Good day, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. For today, we will discuss the lesson 3 item analysis. Throughout the task, we will be tabulating scores, finding the upper and lower group, computing discrimination index and difficulty index on each test items, and we will use the result to interpret and take action whether each test items is subject to revision or removal. Going first to the item analysis tabulation table, the table consists of respondents. So we have 25 grade 3 pupils who answered the 30 items assessment. Here on the right side is the total scores for each student. Moving on to tabulating, take note that when the answer of the student in the test item is correct, put number 1. And if his answer is wrong, put 0. For example, for the first respondents, his task item number 1 is correct, so we put 1. His task item number 2 is correct, so we put 1 again. However, his task item number 3 is wrong, so we put 0. Then we repeat the process with the other task items as well as to other respondents. The next one is getting the upper and lower group. This is important because we will use this data in computing the difficulty index and discriminating index, which we'll discuss later on. Take note that for a class of equivalent to 30 or less than 30, you can do a 50-50 split. For example, if your class composed of 20 students, the upper 10 represents the upper group and the lower 10 represents the lower group. And for a large group, you may take the upper 25 to 27% and lower 25 to 27%. For example, if there are 100 people, so that is already a large number of students. So if there are 100 pupils taking the test, the upper group would be 27 pupils and the lower group would be 27 pupils with the use of 37%. In this case, since our respondents consist of 25 pupils, we can use the 50% in getting the upper and lower group. So the 50% of 25 is 13. So we can use the 13 pupils to the upper group and the remaining pupils to the lower group. However, when we are answering this task, we used the 25% instead of 50%. So we got 6 pupils in the upper group and 6 pupils in the lower group. Next up is the computation for difficulty index and discrimination index.
After splitting the test papers into high and low group, next step is to compute the index of difficulty using this formula, where U is the number of students who responded to the item correctly in the upper group, and U is the total number of students in the upper group. L is the number of students who responded the item correctly in the lower group, and L is the total number of students in the lower group. For example, item number 3. So first, imong isulat ang formula. Dayon, ang uni mo is 5 because sa item number 3, 5 ka students lang ang naka-correct sa item number 3. Dayon ang inyo nimo kay 6 kay mo ni ang total number of students nga naa sa upper. Plus 6 ang L nimo is kaning sa item number 3 is perfect sila. So tanan students nimo nga nasa lower kay check, so 6 yung butang. And same as po sa NL nimo 6 pod kay mo na ang total number of students nga nasa lower. Dayon over 2. Dayon next is 5 divided by 6 is 0.83. 6 divided by 6 is 1. So 0.83 plus 1 over 2. So imong total of D is 0.92. So mo na siya ang answer ninyo animo 0.92.
Good day everyone, this is Carlos Vincent Laride and you can call me Kaloy. So now let us proceed to how we came up with this output. So as you can see on the screen, we have here how we compute the D and ID. On the other hand, we have here the ID, which means discrimination index, and its formula is ID is equal to capital letter U over small letter n with capital letter U minus capital letter L over small letter n with capital letter L, which simply means that capital letter U is the number of students who responded to the item correctly in the upper group, and small letter n with capital letter U is the total number of students in the upper group, while capital letter L is the number of students who responded to the item correctly in the lower group, and small letter n with capital letter L is the total number of students in the lower group. So for example, for item number 1 in ID is equal to 6 over 6 minus 6 over 6 equals 1 minus 1. ID is equal to 0. For the item number 3, we have here ID is equal to 5 over 6 minus 6 over 6. ID is equal to 0.83 minus 1. ID is equal to negative 0.17. As you can see, we have some data that are similar and different with each other, which only means one thing, that some students got the item correctly and some are not.
As you can see from the item analysis summary table, we have gathered all of the tabulation table, the computation for D and ID, and also from the interpretation from each question that the students have answered. Student responses to individual test items in order to assess the quality of those items and of the test as a whole. Item analysis is especially valuable in improving items which will be used again in later tests, but it can also be used to eliminate ambiguous or misleading items in a single test administration. In addition, item analysis is valuable for increasing instructor skills in test constructions, and also for us future educators, we have reflected all of these things that we have gathered and also answered from this activity. Identify specific areas of course content which need greater emphasis or clarity.
Okay, thank you, groups, for that wonderful presentation. And now let's talk about or recap lesson 4. Lesson 4, as I've said, talks about the test development process. And here we also discuss briefly the phases of test development and the table of specification. I know you have read our discussion on this in our CPE 105 ebook. And there's also a short video that explains how you're going to prepare your table of specification. The process of test construction for classroom testing applies the same initial steps and the construction of any instrument designed to measure in psychological constructs. The test construction process includes the following. Okay, A, we have the planning process or planning phase. This is where the purpose of the test is identified, the learning outcomes to be assessed are clearly specified, and lastly, the table of specifications is prepared to guide the test item construction. Then B is what we call the item construction phase. This is where items in the test are constructed following the guidelines. Um, I know you have also read some tips and guidelines on how to construct the different selected response format. The last is the review phase. Prior to the administration of the test, the teacher examines the test items based on the alignment of the content and the behavior component of the instructional competencies. Then, after the administration of the test, the teacher examines again the test based on the analysis of students' performance on each item. I believe you have done this already when you did the item analysis. Then let's talk about the table of specification. What is TOS? Um, we said that TOS is sometimes called a test blueprint. It's just like in a building. Before you can construct a building, you need a blueprint, right? The same here, before you can make your test or construct your test, you need also a test blueprint. So the young test blueprint should go first before constructing your test. Okay. So it's part of the planning process. Another concept is the TOS is a matrix where rows consist of specific topics or competencies and columns are the objectives cast in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. If you have if you remember the table of specification, yung may mga columns yun, right? So the first column is, of course, this is where you place your topic or competencies, or sometimes we call it learning objectives. Another concept, it is a table that helps teachers align objectives, instruction, and assessment. So here, you're going to match if your test items is aligned now with your learning objectives or competencies in the first column. Not only you look into the alignment with regards to the behavioral terms, but also the level of your um, objective. If the level is in the higher order of thinking skills, your test construction should also follow with that high order thinking skills. So if it talks about um, evaluation or evaluating, your test item should also contains evaluating skills. The TOS can also help teachers map the amount of class time spent in each objective with the cognitive level at which each objective was taught, thereby helping teachers to identify the types of items they need to include on their test. If you remember, meron tayong time spent in this objective. So you have to look into the number of days spent for each objectives included in your table specification. And this will also help you um, determine the number of items for each level of objectives in your test. So here's an example. So there are basic steps in constructing your table of specification. First is we're going to um, determine the objectives to be included in the test. So where are we going to get the objectives? Basically, we follow the the curriculum guide, for the elementary and even high schools. We follow the curriculum guide provided by us, no, by the Department of Education. Second is we need to determine the number of minutes, hours, or days allotted or spent on each objective. We have schedules in the basic education. Mayroon tayong mga schedules to follow. For example, maybe in science, um, grade 3, we need to spend 60 minutes, no, or 1 hour per day for that lesson. Okay, so we make use of those time. So that is where you place, no, doon mo ilagay doon sa column 2. Then um, we also determine the uh, total number of items. This can be prerogative or institutional or prescribed. No, when you say prerogative, depende yon sa professional judgment ni teacher. But if it is prescribed, let's say your school requires you to prepare a summative test with, for example, you are assigned in grade 4. Tapos sabi ng school, dapat yung summative test should contain 75 items. Then you follow now what is prescribed by the school. Otherwise, it's prerogative by or professional judgment ni teacher. Next step is you need to determine the number of items for each objective per level of difficulty using certain formula. The formula we use is, of course, total number of items divided by the total number of minutes, hours, or days times the allotted time per objective. For example, in objective number 1. Now, here we decided um, 20 as the total number of items. You can see here in um, column D, the total number of items is 20 divided by the total number of hours or minutes or days, which is here in our example in column B, it's 10. Then the result of that multiply it to the um, allotted time per objective. In this case, for objective number 1, it's 1 hour or let's say 1 day. So multiply mo siya. So 20 divided by 10 equals 2 times 1. That is equals 2. That's why here under easy, we have 2 items. Why easy? Why not place it out in average or difficult? Because if you look at the objective, identify the major parts of the digestive system, it's if you go back to the Bloom's taxonomy or the chart of Bloom's taxonomy, it belongs to remembering. And remembering is easy level. So here in our easy level, we have remembering and understanding. For average, we have application analysis or analyzing, then difficult evaluating and creating. So those are the three categories of these levels. Next is make sure the vertical sum and the horizontal sum of the items are correct, or get the sum of all items under easy, average, and difficult. And also in the horizontal part, no, for objective number 1, the total number of items is 2. Objective number 2, we have also 2, and so on. For easy, we have 6. For average, we have 8. And difficult, we have 4. So total mo get the sum of the vertical and the horizontal um, sum of items. Then write the item placement. Yung IP na yan, it means item placement. This is where the um, location, no, of the test items in your test paper. So when you translate your TOS into your test paper, yung location ng objective 1 ng IP 1 and 2, that is items 1 and 2 in your test paper. Next is determine the type of assessment method to be used. So here sa sample natin is we have you have two types, no? Selection and supply. But in your case, in your lesson output, you're only required to construct multiple choice test. Next, we will see some groups who will be presenting their outputs in this lesson. So let's listen to the group presenters.
Good day, everyone. By the way, I am Laramie A. Manlod, and I am from Group 7. And today, we will going to share to you our output in Lesson 4. So, our objective will be planning and development of summative assessment. So, in Part 1, we're going to create a TOS, or it is also called as the table of specification, and in the part 2 is the multiple choice of test. So in making of table of specification, we have decided na ang among grade level nga among batan is grade 3, subject is science, and then it is for second grading na period. So in TOS, there are columns. Column A, B, C, and D. In column A, there is an instructional objectives or the learning competency. So, mao ni siya ang content sa among objectives. Ikuha na mo siya sa curriculum guide na gibutang sa kuan na naa sa instructions ni sir, which is kaning nasa lesson 4 application activity. So, after getting the curriculum, after getting the objectives, learning objectives, mo na siya dapat nakakuan diri, naka-describe diri kung unsa mo learning objectives. So, and then in column B, there is the number of hours. Mo na siya hours sa mong gigamit. Dayon, in column C, is the cognitive process dimensions. Mo na siya kung unsay nga quality, unsa nga klase ang imong i-test. Easy ba siya, average, or difficult? And then, nakabutang diri ang number of items. Kaning NOI is number of items. IP kay item placement. So, parehas siya sa average, difficult. And then, sa column D, na total number of items. Kung pila ka bulk items ang imong kuan. So, ang E is a type of test. Among gibutang is selection type because ang gipagbuhat sa mga is multiple choice type of test. So, ang multiple choice type is part siya sa selection type which is nganong which why which one nganong selection type of test ang magibutang. So, for example, in our objectives, na nakabutan diri describe the parts and functions of the sense organs of the human body. So the number of hours nga dapat i-discuss siya is 2 hours. And then, ay nga ansiran siya 2 hours na yun. Naa siya sa easy. Ang number of items niya is duha ka buok which is makita siya sa number 1 o 2. So kailangan imong instructional objectives or imong objectives kay makuha nimo ang ma-reach nimo ang imong target diri connect siya sa imong question sa question of items sa multiple choice. Which is ang question diri kay which part of sense organ is described used for seeing. So connected ra pod sila, di ba? Describe parts and functions of sense of the sense organs of the human body. So, sense organ man ang gihistoryahan. So, ang question diri is, sense organ dito siya. And then sa number 2 po, which of the following describes the function of the skin in the human body? So, part gyapon siya sa organ sa human body. Dapat nagyapon diri ang clarity of target kung unsa tong nasa pagbuhat og assessment, summative assessment rather. So, and then the average 2 items po siya, which is the number 17 ug 18. So, i-check na to siya diri sa atong kung nakuha ba niya ang target 17, 18. 17, 18. So, dara. It is a sensory system for vision. So, organ sense gyapon siya. Sense organs gyapon siya of human body. So, number 18, it helps us to perceive a variety of smells. So, talking about smells, it is part of the sense organ of human body gyapon. So, check atong paan sa number 1. So, in anaon yung dapat siya. So, the total items niya, number of items 2 plus 2, so 4 siya kabuok. And then, multiple choice type, which is part sa selection type. So, padayong gyapon na siya up to the kung asa tama nga number. Total number which is 20 items kani siya. Sa ubos na diri ang total. up to 20 items man siya. So, padayonon gyapon na nimo mga objective gikan sa 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, ay 8. We only have 8 objectives. So, kailangan makuha na nimo 8 objectives kuha siya makuha nimo yung clarity of target ba sa imong multiple choice of test sa part 2. So, mali siyang legend, number of item, ang NOI, din ang IP is item placement. And then, ato na siya. Reflection dayon siya ang part 3. So, nanami individual na ni siya nga reflection and we have realized our realization, our contribution na dire. That's all for our work. Thank you for listening, everyone. Again, this is Laramie A. Manlod from Group 7.
Thank you, groups, for that amazing presentations. Now let's move on to lesson 5. Lesson 5 is about understanding classroom assessment in K to 12. So here we'll be briefly, recapping uh, the what are to be assessed in the K to 12 components of summative assessment and view of the grading system in the K to 12. What are to be assessed in the K to 12? We have the content standards now. In content standards, we ask the question, what should the learners know? It means we're going to identify and set the essential knowledge and understanding that should be learned. Example, if you go back or if you try to look into the curriculum guide, meron mga by columns yung arrangement, di ba? Meron siyang content standards, performance standards, and so on. For example, sa science, yeah, one good example in science content standards is the learners demonstrate understanding of ways of sorting materials and describing them as solid, liquid, or gas based on observable properties. Now, when you go to the performance standards, another um, thing to be assessed in the K tool is the performance standards. Ano ba itong performance standards? Is describe the abilities and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards and integration of the 21st century skills. So, may connection yung performance standards. Kasi yung performance standards is a demonstration of skills set doon sa imong content standards. So, example, the learner should be able to group common objects found at home and in school according to solids, liquids, and gas. So, demonstration of skill na yun, di ba? So, sana where they where they are trying to demonstrate the skill sa home and sa school. So, that's an example of a performance standards, meaning that the students were able to demonstrate those skills, apply those skills in their daily living. Next thing to be assessed in the K-12 is the learning competencies. The learning competencies are the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Sometimes we call it KSA or ASK, ASK, attitude, skills, or knowledge. So, for example, describe different objects based on their characteristics. Example, shape, weight, volume, ease of flow. So, ano bang competency doon? Ano bang skill or knowledge or attitude that we're going to develop? The thing that we're going to develop here is knowledge or cognitive level. Describe different objects. So that the word describing is basically knowledge or cognitive. Then the fourth part, no, that are to be assessed in the criteria is the content development. Ano ba itong content development? It is defined as a broad range of cognitive processes from basic to complex. So from simple to complex. You remember yung sa CP 105 we talk about knowledge, simple understanding, and deep understanding. So this goes back again to the Bloom's taxonomy. Yung revised Bloom, we talk about remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So ito mga levels now from knowledge to the higher complex or lower order thinking skills to higher order thinking skills. Components of summative assessment in the K to 12. So there are three components: written work, performance task, at saka quarterly assessment. Ito lang tatlo that are to be graded. The rest are recorded but not graded. But itong component ito are actually graded, recorded at saka graded. So written work ensures that students are able to express skills and concepts in written form. Examples, bigay ka ng long quiz or unit test, essays, or written reports. Yung performance task, it allows learners to show what they know and are able to do in diverse ways. Examples include demonstrations, group presentations, oral work, or research projects. These are examples of performance tasks. For quarterly assessments, um, it measures students' learning at the end of a quarter, like first periodical test, second periodical test, or first summative test, or chapter test. No, so it talks about at the end, no, or end of a course, end of a quarter. Term exams and an example of a quarterly assessment. Now, let's talk about the grading system in the K to 12. The grading system is actually standards based because it measures how students are able to reach the standards in terms of content and performance. Now, for kindergarten, um, they make use of checklists, anecdotal records, instead of numerical grades, based on the standards found in the curriculum guide for kindergarten. Tapos meron pa silang the use of portfolio assessment. Yon. Yon ang grading system ng kindergarten. For grades 1 to 12, yun ang I mentioned previously, we talk about quarterly assessment, written work, performance tasks, right? Now, the distribution, wala tayong requirement doon. There's no required number for written work and performance tasks. But it must spread over the quarter and used to assess learner skills after each unit has been taught. So if you decide, let's say for first grading, I will have three written work and one performance task. That is okay. Okay. So it's based on the professional judgment of the teacher, as long as it is fairly distributed in all the quarters. For our culminating week, although I have explained this already in the previous virtual sessions, but let me review that we are gonna have our wrap up and then the course evaluation. All of these are actually prerequisite to the final exam. You cannot have your final exam unless you fill up or accomplish first the wrap up and the course evaluation. For our final exam, this will be on January 15, 2022, and the coverage, of course, all lessons. The type of test is multiple choice, number of items 50, and it is limited to 2 hours. Just a reminder: once you start, once you start your exam, you need to finish it within 2 hours. Otherwise, it will be automatically submitted, and the scores will be automatically also computed. So if you have any questions, you may ask the questions in our help board. in Molly Help Board, and I will get to that and I will answer your questions. If you have done watching this video, you can go to this link for our attendance. You can fill up the attendance form and you will receive your certificate of attendance. I think I'm done and thank you for watching.